This is Jimmy.
And Scott.
And this is the Lead Domino podcast powered by MDP Lacrosse. On this podcast, we will be discussing with athletes, coaches, and other professionals what specific mental techniques they utilize to prepare, compete, and recover. These are the questions that fascinate us, and we want to hear what our guests do to be their best mentally. And hopefully, you get a little something out of these episodes to help move you forward. On today's episode, we host Steve Vollmer. Steve is a Madison, Wisconsin native who attended Lakeland College, competed in Division III soccer, and earned a business marketing degree. Steve's love of art and sports collided after a few years competing in the Professional Development League for soccer when he joined the Sports Information Department back at Lakeland College. Steve's willingness to learn and work hard afforded him many opportunities until finally landing a 2-week temporary gig at the NFL that lasted for 5 years. Steve brings us on his journey from Madison, Wisconsin to New York City. His story is full of great advice, insights, and tragedy. We learn how 2 major tragedies in Steve's life exposed what he was truly made of and fueled a response of gratitude, passion, and perspective. How does someone turn these negatives into positives? Steve tells us. How does someone combine their 2 passions and make a living? Steve tells us. How does someone manufacture luck? Steve tells us that too. Connect with Steve on LinkedIn and follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Steve Vollmer Jr. That's at Steve, Vollmer Jr. This conversation is full of purpose and intention and really gets to the heart of what makes people successful. We wish Steve much success in this next chapter, and I really hope you guys enjoy listening. Steve Vollmer, welcome to the podcast.
Jimmy, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this. I appreciate you coming.
Absolutely. Very, very happy to be here and joining you.
Great. So this conversation's really going to focus around mental skills that you've acquired, mental habits that you've created, from your childhood to now, and kind of we'll connect all the dots as we go. So right now, let's just jump right in. You start us off. Give us some background, give us some context, and where you've been, where you're going, and we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take it all the way back to Madison, Wisconsin. Born and raised a Badger. Grew up in a university town. It was a lot of fun growing up. For me, there's one thing I loved, and it was sports. Also had a big passion for art as a kid.
Nice.
I grew up playing soccer, basketball, baseball, tennis, everything you can think of, right?
Yep.
Have 2 siblings, my brother Gabe and my sister Heidi, and any chance we got, we'd be outside, playing baseball or football or whatever it may be. And for us, it was a huge part of our upbringing. So,
sure.
Growing up through the years, I actually got a chance to eventually play soccer in college at Lakeland College, which is a small Division III school just north of Milwaukee. And actually had the opportunity to not only have my brother join me there, but he also ended up playing baseball at the same school as well. So had a great college experience. And, after college, I got a chance to play 2 years for the PDL, which is the Professional Developmental League, and basically a feeder system that goes into now what you would call the MLS. So
nice.
A great experience. Played against some really talented kids, and for me, it was all a dream come true and something I loved. And eventually, my body got too worn out and couldn't take it anymore. So I had to find a way to shift out of that.
Yeah, definitely. So, real quick, anything in particular got you into art at a young age?
I mean, honestly, I think it was in my DNA.
Yeah.
I remember growing up at a young age, my mom would always paint Disney characters, in our basement, or she would make a cake that was way crazier and way more, way more exciting than the other kids' parents. And it really was just an art gene that she had.
Yeah.
And little did I know my dad also had it. So I think I was getting it from both angles. It was something I just loved to do as a kid.
Yeah.
Now I have the opportunity to watch, my boys do the same thing, and I just watch them, and it's a fire that burns inside. And so for me,
cool.
I can relate it. It's what was there, and eventually it just took off as I started to progress and figure out what I wanted to do as a career.
Do you remember when you really became aware of it?
It's interesting because I remember it was probably elementary school. My brother and I would literally draw the Simpson characters, Disney characters, and then my brother would take them to school and try to sell them for 25 cents each. And so we were entrepreneurs from day one.
Wow.
And that was the other side of my brain, right? I was working hard to mow my neighbors' lawns and do things like that. But ultimately, it was just trying to find, what I was good at and make a business out of it. So I do remember doing that at a very young age, and it's something I love to do.
That's cool.
And just kept progressing from there.
You remember your first sale of any of your artwork?
It's crazy. My brother was the hustler. I was the artist, so I was the one really focused on just making things look good, and he was the one out there scheming his friends into buying my art for a quarter. So
that's good teamwork.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were a squad from day one. So
that's really funny.
Really, really cool.
That's funny.
Yeah, man.
All right, so then you're in the PDL, right? And you said your body eventually breaks down and you move on. So what did you move on to? What was the first thing you did after that? Or were you working as you were doing that? Like what was your life like for that?
Yep. So I had a full-time gig. I went to school for business and marketing. And while I was in school, I found out that I could pursue my art for a job as well. And I took a gig in the athletic department at Lakeland College, working for the sports information director.
That's a great stepping stone for anybody looking to get into that.
Yeah, it was crazy because it was one of those things that I was always around the athletic department. I was an athlete. I was around the right people, and one of the coaches were just like, "Why don't you work for the SID, see what he has going on?" And before I knew it, they were asking me to help design media guides and a few different things. And I was like, wow, I didn't realize I could actually do this as a profession.
Right.
And that's really where it, started to, burn inside that this is something I really love to do. And eventually, pursued that track, from a major perspective. Ended up working in a couple local newspapers up there near Kohler, Wisconsin. Ended up working for the Kohler company as an intern, and I had a bunch of different opportunities just in that realm.
Yeah.
And then for me, where the shift came was when I got an opportunity to work for a sports magazine in Madison. So 2 years out of college, got a chance to go back home, work for a sports magazine that covered. It was a statewide publication.
Okay.
So it covered all of the Division I schools. It covered the professional sports. So I got a chance to do photo shoots with guys like TJ Ford, the point guard of the Bucks.
Sure.
Guys on, Wisconsin Badgers that I grew up watching.
Wow.
But they also covered the Division III sports. And so for me, it was awesome because that's the conference I played in. I knew a lot of the guys, the coaches. And so for me, it was really exciting to be able to continue to, do creative per se for a publication that was covering a sport that I had just played and just came out of. So
that's really cool.
So that's again, that's where it lit, the fire lit, and and it went from there. And after that opportunity, I was promoted to an editorial art director at a business publication, which steered me away from sports, but still got my juices flowing from a creative perspective.
Sure.
At that time, I also got a chance to meet who's now my amazing wife, Patty Ann. That's where everything really took off. And, to take a few steps back, I know we try to, in hindsight, take a look and figure out what are the points in life that really define your success or the direction that you take your life.
Sure.
And, through all of those things that we just talked about, I got to a point where at the age of 24, my dad passed away from a heart attack. And then 2 years later, my mom and brother were actually in a car accident. And so for me, it was a holy crap moment of, is this really happening? How does this happen back to back? My life literally fell apart before my eyes. And mentally, we're talking about mental toughness or mental preparation, right?
Yeah,
at that point, I knew in order for me to truly get the best out of what I wanted to do and be who I wanted to be, and at that point, be who my parents raised me to be, right? I had to choose, do I want to get through this and grieve and get the help that I needed to get through this tragedy?
Right.
Or am I going to allow this to blow me up and maybe start drinking or, getting away from who I was and who I was raised to be, right? And
sure,
during that time, it was definitely a crazy time, full of emotion.
So you're saying within 2 to 3 years, you had three family members pass away. Your father, your mother, and your brother.
Yeah, that's correct. So in a window of 2 years.
Okay.
And to give you perspective, look, like we all love our families. We're all close with our family. My brother was definitely my best friend. My parents were the type of parents, my brother and I were 15 months apart. So, of course he was playing up with me in all the sports that I played, and that's why he was so damn good. But, my parents were definitely the type of parents who not only did my dad coach me, from day one, in every sport that we had, but they were the parents who were there for every single game from the time we were 5 to the time we were 25, right?
Sure.
And I always remember in hindsight, my college teammates would look at me and we'd be out in Portland, Oregon, or we'd be in Lexington, Kentucky. They'd say, "Holy crap, like your parents are here again? Like, how do they do that?" Right?
Yeah.
And I always looked at them like, yeah, that's my parents. That's what they do. Right. And as you look back, and now that I am a parent, I know the sacrifice and the importance of those moments and those memories.
Sure.
And that was their gift to me to now carry on to what I am living today and what I hope to be and strive for my family and my kids. And,
Wow.
like I said before, everything in hindsight is 20/20. But as I really look at my journey and how it unfolded, it all makes sense, right? Like they were given of themselves for a much shorter period of time than most people get on this earth. And to me, their actions made complete sense in hindsight for what they were allowed to give me as a gift of themselves.
Sure.
In the short period that I had with them. And so now it's very clear, right, on what my priorities are and what I want to achieve. And that was the fire or the moment that was pivotal for me in knowing that I wanted every ounce of my energy and everything I do in life to not be wasted. And really that's where it all flourished from, and I go back to the moment I met my wife, to the moment I realized that I truly, truly loved what I was doing for a career path, to all these different things.
Yeah.
And I can't help myself, but, do it with passion, do it with preparation, and do it with everything that I have, because you never know, when your time is up. And that extreme perspective are things that I definitely try to temper and try to be real with and not get too over the top, but it really is the key of what drives me.
Yeah.
And what has given me what I would call career success and personal success.
Wow. Yeah. So you're 24 at this point, that, the horrific tragedies happen, and the one word, as you were describing that and just telling that story, the one word that popped in my head was gratitude. And it seems like that was in you. I don't think it created gratitude, but I think it definitely excelled it, or brought it to the surface. And
I think that's a great way to put it. I think what I would tell you is everything that I had in my core, everything that my parents raised me to be and who I was naturally, was essentially magnified.
Sure. Yeah, it was exposed and magnified.
It's interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying, it was exposed and magnified. Yeah.
The unique thing about that is I always get comments from colleagues, from executives, and from different people that I work with who don't understand how I'm able to remain so cool under pressure. They don't understand how I'm able to approach every single day that I'm working with a smile and with with joy, quite frankly.
Just enthusiasm and joy.
Yeah, and for me, it all goes back to living my life. Number one, doing what I absolutely love, and doing it for the people that I love. And that's my vision every single morning. And when I get up and do that, I have no choice but to succeed and no choice but to give it everything that I have.
Yeah.
And the remaining cool under pressure point of it is I've seen some crazy shit. So when I'm in a room full of stressed out colleagues, I know that there's a lot of things in this world that could be so much worse. There's a lot of feelings and tragedy that can really knock you off your feet. And if we keep that in perspective, remaining cool under pressure is a small part of that story. And
I guess through your life experience, weird. you just have different perspective. You have a much broader perspective of like what you said, everything, of life in general.
Yep, absolutely. So it's weird, but in hindsight, my sister and I say this. I literally just spoke to her earlier tonight, and it's the weirdest blessing in disguise I ever received was the passing of my loved ones, my parents, my best friends, my heart. Right, like the best gift they gave to me was themselves for a very short period of time. But also the perspective when they passed flipped a switch in me that gave me a drive and a passion that I may have never acquired in a lifetime, if that makes sense.
No, I mean, it makes complete sense. And I think as someone who wasn't living that with you, just going through something like that and actually being able to see that, whether it's now or even just a little bit back then, to me just speaks volumes of what we always talk about, mental habits, and really they're created from your parents, right? So, your earliest role models are your authority figures and your parents and the older people around you when you're younger. So obviously they did a lot of things correctly, because that's the ultimate adversity. As coaches and trainers, and I work with athletes every single day of my life, we talk about adversity. We're usually talking about losing a game or letting up a goal or missing the final shot. That's the ultimate adversity. And for all of those characteristics to be exposed in you and magnified, it seems exactly accurate what you're talking about, that they did the ultimate work and really gave you the foundation to move forward.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
Yeah, definitely an incredible perspective for sure.
Yeah.
So that's definitely been my foundation, and then we've taken it from there. So
and back to your point about like stressed out colleagues, and we can get into your life as in professional sports and things like that. So you're in a lot of heat. There's a lot going on. I'm sure it's fast paced. It's high stakes. A lot's on the line. But something we talk about, and for anyone who pays attention to the mental skills and mental habits and different things, there's a lot of people who talk about what's your why. What's that?
Right.
What's that why? And I feel like there's even a lot of people who can move on with life and do some good things, and they don't even have that why really figured out. They do the what, like they're really, let's say they're really sharp, technically good artist or designer or something like that.
Yeah.
But their why is not that solid. So under pressure, they could crack. Right.
Agreed.
But if you have that why and that foundation really solid, and it's always adapting, it's never going to stay the same, but in that moment, it's as solid as it can be. I think that definitely adds to that emotional management under pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's all about perspective. It's all about what your end goal is, and
sure.
At the end of the day, it is essentially it's an executive intelligence that allows you to really focus on the task at hand without not being able to lose sight of what that goal is and how you're going to get there. And the more rattled you are, you see it on a field, right?
Yeah.
When you're coaching, the more rattled you are, the more the more you forget, the more you lose sight of who you
Yeah.
are and what you're trying to do.
Sure. And
You know,
even as
there's
a
a reason.
coach, even as a coach, you start
Yep.
losing your emotions. You know, the kids, the men, you know, women, whoever you're coaching, they start to get rattled just based off of your body language and the way you're talking. You
Yeah.
know, so it's that's a little different as an athlete. You know, as an athlete, if you're rattled, you're rattled. But as a coach,
Yeah.
you can rattle a 50-man roster. You know,
Yep.
in a
No,
minute.
that's a great point. And
You
I
know?
actually noticed that was one of the things I noticed when I was playing sports, where, you know, as you progress through the ranks and as you become, you know, you work with professionals and things like that. One of the things I did notice about coaches were my coaches in the professional ranks were so cool, calm, and collected during a game. They
Yep.
were sometimes mute, right? And they knew what they needed to do to get the most out of each player. And they knew that if they exploded and you know, lost control, that it was going to be hard for their athletes to focus. And
Yeah.
so I understood that too, and saw that as a coach. You know, saw that from my coaches as I was rising through the ranks as well.
Yeah, and a philosophy I've really, you know, believed in and tried to study and tried to emulate is also I believe that if those coaches did mismanage their emotions, they actually wouldn't be able to make those decisions. They
Yeah.
wouldn't see that, you know, Stevie's slowing down, we need to sub him out, or we need to move Stevie around, or, you know, something like that. They wouldn't see
Yeah.
it. And then everyone else would know it, and, you know, that's when the wheels fall off.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I also think, to that point, coaches, let's say at the professional ranks, they've probably been around longer. So in terms of a sports life, their perspective is larger. Their perspective, you know, they've lost a lot of games, and I'm sure they've won a lot of games. You
Yeah.
know, so they also can see the big picture a little bit better than, you know, sometimes as a young coach, you're fired up, you're ready to go, you want to win, you know, and you get a little too overheated in battle.
Yep. Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, great stuff.
All right, so now we've gone through kind of your early 20s, and just to jump back quickly, and I think this could be of use for some people, that as you were going from, you know, your college job as an SID, and then you got another opportunity. Were those opportunities, were you seeking them out? Were people tipping you off like, hey man, you're doing a really good job, you might want to look over here, they're looking for somebody? Like how did that work? How did you actually jump from job to job?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think earlier in the early days, I'll call it,
Yeah.
is I was doing my best to keep my head down, work hard, and learn as much as I could. Right,
Okay.
that was those were my early goals. And you know, we can jump back into the point of, you know, when I met my wife, I was an editorial art director for a business publication. We ended up getting married, and we made the decision to move back, you know, closer to her parents and her relatives, which is, for me, was a super intentional thing, right? Like we had just had our first son. Gabriel was a year old. I knew the gift of what my parents gave me, and I knew that I wanted to raise, and my wife did as well, that we wanted to raise our kids around their grandparents.
Sure.
And so for us, that was an intentional decision, because we knew, you know, me through my extreme perspective,
Yep.
you know, really valued that connection and those relationships, and wanted to give them, Gabriel at the time. Now we have Jack and Madison, but being able to give them the gift of that connection with family and with their grandparents and with the people who could love them unconditionally.
Sure.
And that was an intentional move. The other side of that is at that point, so I had worked at the business publication just before we moved. I had worked for an agency for a couple of years prior to that. And I was doing a lot of different things, not sports specifically, but for many different regional brands.
Okay.
And then when we chose to move to New York, we did that. My wife was working for Hewlett-Packard at the time, so she could work from anywhere because she was working from home. And we decided to essentially me to pick up and move without a job, right? So we knew that my skill set would transfer to New York.
Sure.
Right, the creative industry in New York is the cream of the crop, and there are many opportunities. We moved to New York. We ended up staying at my in-laws' house for a few months until we got our own place. I remember going into the city to try to find a job, and at that point, every single day I was literally getting on the train, Long Island Railroad, going to Manhattan, going to a bunch of different temp creative agencies, presenting my resume, right, and taking meetings and just doing whatever I could to try to get a gig. The first job that I got was for a small agency in the city, and for me it was great because it kind of gave me a taste of what it's like to work in the city.
Sure.
What the grind is like, what the commute is like.
Had you ever been to New York City before that?
No. Before I moved, I had never been.
So it's like,
never
all right,
been, dude.
I'm living on Long Island, and now I'm just going to I'm commuting to the city, looking for a job.
Listen, my wife called me Fievel, man. Right? Like, I'm going to the city. I have no idea what I'm getting myself into. But as a father and a husband, I didn't have that fear. And yes, I think it relates back to everything we discussed previously.
Sure. Yeah, no doubt.
I didn't have a fear of failure. I knew that I needed to provide. I wanted to be a good father. I wanted to be a good husband. Yeah. And I needed to find a damn job, right? And I knew where my skill set was. And so that's what I did. Now, my mindset over that first 6 months of working in this agency was, it was working for somebody who I absolutely couldn't stand, honestly, working with. It was a blessing. I'm super grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah.
But it was a pretty rough transition. And I came home one day and I said, babe, I'm working in the greatest city in the world. I'm a sports guy. I love sports. Why am I not finding a gig in sports? And so I think just putting that energy in the world, it's crazy how it comes full circle. But 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from the very first agency that I reached out to when I got to Manhattan. And they called up and they said, do you want to work for the NFL for 2 weeks? And I'm like, holy shit. Do I want to work for the NFL? Absolutely. Are you going to pay me? I really don't care, right? Like, I'll do it for free. Like that opportunity to me, growing up as a soccer player, right, like was equivalent to the World Cup. Yeah. Being able to work for the NFL, growing up as a Packer fan, being a literal cheesehead for me was a dream come true. And another thing that I have been able to harness is I can still remember and feel the emotion that went through me when I received that phone call. I remember the emotion and the feeling that I got when I was going on the train for the first time to go to my job at the National Football League.
And at their headquarters in the city.
Yes.
A couple months into moving to Long Island with no job.
Yes. Yep. So Park Avenue and 51st. And for me, I knew that I needed to harness that feeling because that's a feeling I wanted to feel over and over again. And as part of your thought process and being able to envision what you want to do and where you want to be, like those are things that I think I've intuitively done along the way because I knew that was something I wanted to feel once again and continue to drive me. And for me, that's kind of really where my career today took off.
Wow.
I was at the NFL. That 2 weeks turned into 5 years. I got an opportunity to design from start to finish for the NFL Pro Bowl, the NFL Draft. I had an opportunity to dabble and be a small part of some of the teams for the Super Bowl. And by the time I ended there after my 5-year stint, I was really helping lead the creative team for the Draft and Pro Bowl. And for me, it was a freaking dream come true. And,
yeah, that's unbelievable.
That was kind of what set it off. And then from there, I actually took a gig at a sports agency in Manhattan for a year and a half.
Okay.
Got a chance to work with the PGA, and we launched their first President's Cup fan experience in Manhattan.
Wow.
And we did a lot of cool things. I got a call 2 years later from a colleague who worked for the Brooklyn Nets. and they were trying to recruit a creative director. And, I had been recommended internally. And I also, at the same time, had applied for the gig and got a call from them. And they basically, offered me the creative director role with the Brooklyn Nets. And I took it. Wow. And so that was a huge accomplishment on the creative side, and something that, again, I'll never forget. So,
sure.
That's where I'm at today, and that's kind of how my career life came full circle.
Wow. That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. So to really get into the creative piece, what was it like? Well, let's go back to the NFL. What was it like navigating an NFL position? Let's say you turn 2 weeks into 5 years. So obviously there's talent, but like, what else did it take to really, turn those 2 weeks into 5 years?
So I can confidently say that the day I walked into the NFL, I probably was the least talented designer there. And look, that's a self-perception, right?
Yep.
But that is something I'm comfortable saying. But what I will say in parallel with that is I feel like I was willing to put in the work and the effort to make sure that I would not always be the least talented. Look, in hindsight, working with all these creatives who are now my friends and people I love dearly, but going in on day one, it's like, holy shit, these guys are the real deal. They're doing this with their eyes closed. What they're doing in an hour, it takes me a day to bring to the table, right?
Sure.
And so what I did is I essentially would, go in every day, damn near at 6 a.m. and not leave until I got done what I needed to get done. And for me, it was, listen, I've always been a competitor, and I think that comes through sport. Sure. And that has prepared me to be willing to work that way. Now, I also had parents who worked their ass off. Like my mom, growing up, she would work second and third shifts, just so she could help provide for our family.
Sure.
And so for me, I saw that firsthand and knew that, shit, if my mom can do that, if my mom can work to provide for us, the least I can do is bust my ass to take everything that she sacrificed for and gave to me and take it to the absolute extreme that I can. And that was also just part of that driving force of what's behind the scenes and what makes me tick. And
it sounds like the perfect storm. Sounds like the perfect storm of, you found a passion, but you also had the work ethic and the discipline instilled in you. So here's the other factor too. What I would say is equally as important, and I know you touched on this before, was the gratitude. Yep. And treating people the way you want to be treated, right? It's a cheesy ass golden rule. Sure. But to me, it's been honestly a secret weapon. Work hard, be talented because you've worked hard to get there. Yep. Treat people with respect. Be kind to the people around you, and ultimately, those people are the ones people want to work with. To this day, those are the types of designers that I hire. I don't give a shit if you're the most talented person in the room, but if you have a great attitude and you're willing to work to get there, I'll take you every day of the week over the most talented person in the room. Wow. And I think for me, that has been my secret sauce of what kind of gave me the ability to get to where I am today. Sure. And I think that's a huge part of being able to forge relationships that are meaningful and now give you the opportunities that you're presented with. Yeah. But that's a huge part of that. And, interesting. Yeah. I'm also at a point, I've been in Brooklyn for just over 2 years. And through those connections, I was recently recruited to be the creative director for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I just accepted that opportunity. And for me, that's another hurdle and another thing that I'm super proud of. Obviously that was a move that wasn't easy because now we're talking about moving on from New York, moving on from the family that we love and being in a different location, with our kids. But at the end of the day, it was really just thinking through what
what's important to us as parents, what's important to me as a father. In 5 years from now, I want to be able to be that dad who coaches my sons and my daughter, and has an opportunity to be more present in their life. And, we truly felt that was that opportunity to move on to Tampa will give us that, but also allow me to continue to work with passion, work as hard as I do, but just do it at a place that, I don't have to commute an hour and a half to 2 hours a day. So that
Wait,
really
so that's unbelievable. You're back in the NFL
Yeah.
as the creative director for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and
Yep.
and this just happened recently.
It did. It happened a couple weeks ago. So
wow.
It all comes full circle, man. And I think the important part is that it does every decision that we make kind of roots back to our experiences of growing up or of knowing what we want to give our family or our kids. And for me, it was, a little bit of a better balance of my time to them, but also, being able to continue to, be inspired and work my butt off and do something that I love.
Sure. I think to your point, and, I read a lot, listen to podcasts and people talk about work-life balance and things like that. But you just said something before about your mother, how her working 2-3 shifts, she would take on extra work just to help the family. Like you were aware of that. And I do think that's an important piece that a lot of people don't touch on, that your children need to have a sense that you are working. Right? And I think sometimes when they talk about work-life balance, it's like, well, if you're just with your kids and it's always, you're not doing anything, they're going to be like, well, they're not going to have that role model. They're not going to have that example because they're just not aware of it because you're not doing it. Right. So that's a very good point, that you still want to work your butt off, but still be there for them. And I think that's huge, and I feel like I had a role model with my father like that. When he was working his butt off. When he was with us, he was with us, And
exactly.
I think that's special. I definitely think that's
special.
Absolutely.
And it's intentional, right? Like we, the kids all the time, you can relate. Where are you going? Why do you got to go to work? Right. And, it's okay. Right. You tell them in order to live here, to have clothes, to have everything we need. This is what mommy and daddy do. And we're blessed to be able to do it. Right.
Right.
There's so many people out there that don't have the opportunity, especially right now, that, you truly got to be grateful for what we're given. And I think as long as your energy and your heart's in the right spot, I think they'll see that and they'll be inspired by it.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. That's incredible. And congratulations, by the way. That was,
Thank you, man.
That's some big news. That's really
Definitely.
Cool.
Yeah, very exciting. Cool. I'm very excited. It all came together, and it definitely helps to see the team they're pulling together.
Interesting timing too for the Buccaneers. They're gonna have they'll have 3 All-Stars down there now.
I appreciate that. That's funny. It's good stuff.
Yeah. So just before we wrap up, I'm curious how you take a creative task or a creative assignment.
Yep.
Like how do you keep creativity within deadlines? We touched on it before. You're in professional sports. Things happen. So how do you keep those juices flowing within the constraints of time or I don't know, real certain specifications?
Yep. It's a great question. So, and I think this also is something to think about for creatives out there that are looking to obviously design, right? That's what I started as a graphic designer, and I progressed into more of a creative leadership role. And so I've gone from using, my creative brain to using my analytical side of my brain to work with ownership, to understand the task, to understand our KPIs and our goals,
okay,
and to really figure out how to take that and turn that into a campaign, or turn that into a rebrand, or turn that into, whatever creative we're addressing at the moment. And for me, it's always about going back to that process that you do over and over and over. And I'll give you a campaign, for example.
Yeah.
So when you're starting doing a season campaign for a team, we'll say for the Brooklyn Nets,
okay,
right? It's all about understanding, what the goals of the CMO or the ownership group is. What do they want to get out of their campaign for the year? Do they want to sell the team as a gritty underdog who's going to work hard and is going to be really exciting for the fans to watch because
sure,
they're blue collar and they're not afraid to get their hands dirty?
Yep.
Or are they looking to elevate the brand a little bit more because they've just acquired two incredible players in Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving? And so those two visions, right, align differently from a creative perspective.
Sure.
The gritty, work hard, blue collar vibe is a very personal, handcrafted, gritty look and feel.
Yep.
And the more elevated look is a more minimal, premium Apple/Mercedes vibe, right?
Okay.
And there's
Makes
there's
sense.
ways for you to visually bring that to life once you understand those cues and how to get an emotional reaction based off of what your objective is. And so, like I said, it's all about preparation, right? It's about knowing your goals, number one. It's about doing the research and understanding the reference points that you want to bring to light. And then it's about telling a story for every concept you bring to the table. It's about establishing a color palette that gets an emotional reaction that you want. It's about creating a mood board or photography that tells the story you want to tell, right? So if we want to show some iconic parts of Brooklyn that really show the best of what authentic Brooklyn is and bring that into our campaign, if we want to bring some color to a brand that is solely black and white, like we're going to do that through photography. We're going to do that through the street art that you see throughout the Brooklyn community. We're going to do that through many different avenues, but it's really about, what your goal is and what story you want to tell. And then it's about taking that story and creating it or designing it across many different applications, whether it's your digital campaign, whether it's your out-of-home billboards or, subway posters or subway digital boards, or is it on a bus that's going to be in Manhattan, or is it something that's going to be, on a direct mail piece that you're sending to a season ticket member, right?
Right.
Or some sort of premium packaging that you want to connect the dots to tell that story. And really, it's my job as a creative lead to make sure not only am I preparing my team to understand what the true goals are, but to also give them guidance on what avenues to start to discover. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's my job to inspire them to do work that exceeds their own expectations. And so for me, I do that through making sure I'm prepared and I have a clear direction that I can give them.
Right.
And I'm making sure that I know what each of them bring to the table and what makes them tick and what really, where their passions lie. And if I can do that as a leader, then it becomes fun and very easy to get results in a very tight time frame.
Sure. It sounds like you're coaching a team.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
I mean, that's what you just defined. So it doesn't matter what team it is or where. It's really the same fundamentals.
Exactly.
Now, you were just talking about the different aspects of design to, I think you said create an emotional reaction or to find that emotional reaction, and you're talking about that's in the end user of that artwork. Yep. So, is that like saying people are more likely to make a decision based off of that emotion versus like analytically looking at it and logically thinking like, oh, do I want to go to a Nets game tonight? It's like, no, I got to be there because I see this, I see that, and people are talking about it. It's all over the place. It's on social. It's
Yeah,
everywhere.
that's a great question. What I would say is the data is extremely important in knowing who your customer is, how you're going to reach them, what's important to them,
Yeah.
right? So you can truly define who they are and what you want to do. But then the creative side of that is, now how do we create a campaign that connects with them, that's going to speak to them, and that's going to really make them tick, right? So if we're
Sure.
talking about digital marketing or digital creative in general, if I know that my demographic or my target is a father, age range 40 to 50, brings his families to games, lives in the borough of Brooklyn, and has been a Nets fan for the last 5 years, the messaging that I'm going to give him is going to pull on the heartstrings of raising his kids as Nets fans.
Right.
Is bringing them to the game, and it's going to be supported with imagery that supports that emotional reaction that will make him tick.
And that
Now,
pulls
if
out
I'm
and that pulls out his nostalgic memories when he was a kid with his parents.
absolutely,
Right? It plays the whole
yep,
thing. Yeah, that's cool.
yep.
That's
And
really
also,
cool.
if we know that there is a fan who has been a New Jersey Nets fan for the last 20 years and is still a Brooklyn Nets fan, we're going to do our best to connect the dots from back in the day, right? Like, there's a reason. There's many different ways to do that, and having a guy like Kyrie Irving on the team, who was born and raised a Nets fan, and has lived in New Jersey his entire life,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
grew up coming over to Brooklyn to play AAU ball, and
Yeah.
he truly has an authentic story to tell. We're going to leverage that story in connecting the dots for those demos that really bring that to life and really
Sure.
make it real, make it nostalgic, and make them ultimately, want to continue to be part of this fan base.
Sure.
Right. So even though it is a transactional thought process, if you're not painting the picture in a very intentional way that is authentic, then
Right.
the fans will read through the bullshit. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
a big part of me being a fan and understanding sports and playing sports growing up is I can relate to many of these different segments that we're trying to market to. And at the end of the day, it's what makes them tick, what makes them react, and what gives them that emotional response.
Interesting. Yeah. And that, you saying that stuck out to me because through my experience coaching at the collegiate level and recruiting, or just being at the high school level, helping kids find a home, every institution has, their majors, they have their location, like all the, kind of like what you were saying, like the data, like the facts, like this
Yep.
school's in this state, this school's in that state. But what you really figure out is most people are making that decision on emotion, and not in a bad way. It's really like
Yep.
in the feel, in the vibe, and like
Yep.
the level of comfort they have when they meet with the coaching staff or they walk through the campus and they really feel it. So like as a college coach, you're sitting there like, all right, how do this kid's up, like he's coming to campus, how do we get him? And it's just like,
Yep.
let's just show him, who we are and what we do,
Yep.
and it really speaks volumes.
Yeah, and if you know what's important to them, right? Like, is it proximity to family? Is
Right.
it the fact that he has a cousin that also goes to school here? Is it right? Is it
Yeah.
the fact that his girlfriend goes to school here? Right?
Yeah.
Like, there's many different
Yeah.
parameters.
Do as much
and
research
if
as
you
possible. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. So
Wow.
it's all about preparation, and then it's about allowing your skill set to kick in, right?
Yeah.
So if you're at a point where that all becomes second nature, if you have the right information, if you do the right research, then you should be able to be successful every single time.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. For sure. Yeah, man. So let's that was incredible, by the way. That was full of a lot of there's a lot going on in this conversation. So there's definitely a lot of information. Definitely going to help a lot of people. Really appreciate it. But we'll wrap it up there. Just before we go, is there anything you want to let people know? Any social handles, anything to follow, keeping track with you, things like that?
Yeah, no, I've always enjoyed mentoring, connecting with people, networking. Never hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at Steve Vollmer Jr.
Okay.
But I think to wrap it all up, I think what I would say to anybody is, if you're willing to work hard, if you're lucky enough to find what you're passionate about and do it for a living, if you're grateful and treat people with kindness, like those three things, you can do whatever the hell you want, whatever the hell you put your mind to.
Sure.
And look, like, the best thing about that is, if you love what you do and you're doing it with the people that you really enjoy to be around, it's not work, man. And you're able to provide, and money doesn't matter at that point, because if you're that passionate and that focused on producing amazing shit, quite frankly, the money will come. And that's what I try to share with people that have asked me those types of questions is how do I do, how do I get paid, and how do I make a good living off of this? It's really finding what you love to do and just doing it to the best of your ability.
Sure.
And when you get there, the money will be enough, because you're gonna get to a level that you may surprise yourself.
Yeah. That makes sense.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, listen, Steve, I really appreciate it. You're the man. Congrats with the news, heading down to Tampa Bay. That's awesome. And,
appreciate it, man. It's been a blast.
Yeah, let's keep in touch. We'll be following you.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
All right.
It's been a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks, Steve. You've been listening to the Lead Domino podcast, powered by MDP. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Reach out. We'd love to chat and learn more about you and how we can help. Visit us at mdplacrosse.com and follow us on Instagram at MDP Lacrosse Training and at Lead Domino Media. Until next time, respect, inspire, and support yourselves and each other.